And I think we've already talked, Russ, you've covered all of the $4.5 billion that the U.S. Billion that the U.S. invested in that to really kind of kickstart this, and 3.5 was in the smart grid investment grants that Russ covered already. Again, as I mentioned before, standards really are a key aspect of the U.S. policy. And now I'd like to talk kind of where the role of the National Institute of Standards and Technology came to play in the U.S. So this Energy Independence and Security Act legislation in 2007 gave NIST the primary responsibility to coordinate the development of a framework that includes protocols and model standards for information management to achieve interoperability of smart grid devices and systems. That legislation went on to say that they told NIST that this framework that we developed had to be flexible, uniform, and technology neutral. So they pretty much tied our hands behind our back right to begin with here. But clearly that is the right thing to do. And again, some of the standards that we'd already defined earlier were used as a requirement for these smart grid investment grants that Russ had mentioned as well. Now I'd like to talk about some of the recent NIST activities, what we've done in order to accomplish our smart grid role as defined in the Energy Independence and Security Act. So one of the first things that we did when this legislation came out, actually is a couple of years later because we didn't get the funding until about 2 years later, but one of the first things that we did was we developed a three-phase plan to accomplish the task that was given to us. So first, we set out to create a smart grid framework, including an initial set of standards. We had identified, and something we thought, some of these standards, these initial standards, we thought all stakeholders would be able to agree to. And we held 3 public workshops starting in April of 2009 to gather input. Phase 2 then of our plan was to create a public-private group to take the NIST framework, the initial framework, and continue to evolve it. And finally, phase 3 of our plan was to create a testing and certification framework. So that's kind of what's laid out here. And you know, as we've kind of gone through this activity, I did want to mention that, again, that I said, you know, standards do provide the foundation for the smart grid. And so this is where some of our standards are coming from. Today we're dealing with over 26 different standard setting organizations. And as you can imagine, that really does complicate, you know, with everything having to work end to end and to work smoothly. And also, as I'd point out here, this is a much different standards landscape than you would have seen just a few years ago, right? I mean, you would have seen IEC, you would have seen the IEEE, but now you've got ISO, ITU, IETF, SAE, you know, a lot of these other organizations as well. So a much different landscape, and again, it just continues to complicate the picture. As I said before, in phase 1, we wanted to, of our 3-phase plan, we identified and we wanted to create this initial smart grid framework to really kickstart things in the U.S. And so we did publish this framework in January of 2009. It was actually completed in less than a year, and it includes a smart grid vision and a reference model. We identified 75 existing standards that we thought were close to ready for prime time, and 25 of those were what we thought were really ready, pretty much had a lot of consensus on. The other 50, there was still some consensus to be achieved on those. And then we took a look at those standards, those 25, and we said, well, there's still some work to do. And so we identified 16 priority action plan projects so we could work with the SDOs to fill those gaps in those standards. And we also produced a companion cybersecurity strategy. And I can't overemphasize enough how important cybersecurity is in the smart grid. We'll talk just a little bit more about that. But this was, again, our first phase of our plan. And in the second phase of our plan, as I mentioned before, we wanted to create this public-private partnership. So this was the second phase of the plan. And that was created in November of 2009 Today we have almost 650 member organizations. It's an open public process with international participation. And it's really taking that NIST initial roadmap and continuing to evolve that product. And in addition, it also includes the testing and certification phase, which was the third phase of the NIST plan as well. And again, I did want to point out that we don't develop standards. We identify requirements, we prioritize standards, and we identify gaps and work with the SDOs to fix those gaps. And again, I'm about to run out of time, I think, here, but I did just want to point out that this organization, it's funded by NIST right now, the secretariat role, but it's really, truly, it has its own independent board, which NIST is a member, but an observing member. NIST and the government cannot vote in this process. It has its own bylaws, and kind of in the middle of the left-hand side there, I did want to point out we have different standing committees, a testing and certification committee, architecture committee, cybersecurity working group, which is a standing working group. And then, of course, we have these priority action plans, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The membership itself, one thing I wanted to point out in the upper right-hand corner, you can see we have almost 70 different international organizations that belong to this Smart Grid Interoperability Panel now. And wanted to talk about the Cybersecurity Working Group. In August of 2010, we published the guidelines for smart grid cybersecurity, and that's all online, and I'll show you where that link is in a little bit. We have almost 600 cybersecurity experts from all over the world that provided input into this document, and it really is an excellent document that addresses a lot of the security aspects. I talked a little bit about some of these priority action plans. I don't have time to go through these, but these are some of the areas that we're working on to help fix and identify new requirements for the standard so that the SDOs can go back and make some fixes. This is how you participate, several ways of participating in the SGIP. And again, I encourage everyone to join. It's free to join. You can participate virtually. All meetings are held, with conference calls and web access. So we have a lot of organizations from all over the world. As I said, there's almost 60 different international organizations participating in this. And I wanted to talk a little bit about global collaboration, and that is truly the key to success. And I don't know, somewhere I saw Guido back there, but he had talked about this, and there are a lot of differences. I mean, the laws of physics are the laws of physics, and while there are some differences in the electrical systems, the IT systems that will support the smart grid can all be the same, and there really is no need to go into different directions, and we all need to work together. And there's a lot of advantages by doing that, as you can see in that bottom bullet point. I think that concludes. Oh, I did want to talk about the source of standards in the NIST framework, and you can see we almost have 80% of those standards are international. Again, I think that's key. Even some of the domestic standards like Zigbee are really adapted pretty much internationally now, so that number is probably even a little bit higher in terms of the international standards. And finally, well, we've talked about that already, Russ, so since I'm out of time, I do have this website here, and you can go to that web portal there, and all of the documents that NIST has done, that the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel has completed, everything is out there for public access. In fact, China has taken our cybersecurity document and translated that into Chinese. They did ask permission, and we certainly granted that. And we granted permission for them to take the NIST Smart Grid framework and translate that into Chinese as well, and they're in the process of doing that now. So I think global collaboration truly is the key, and we can all succeed. Thank you.